All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Ulcca Joshi Hansen. I'm co-interim executive director of Grantmakers for Education and chief program officer. I'm joined today by Rebecca Smith, Kara Compatoon, and some other folks from our team. We are excited to have you here. Our RFP opened this week, and we're excited to see what the field has in store and has on offer for the conference this year. So we thought today that we would go through the basics. This is our EdFunders conference session proposal Q&A. We thought what we do is go through, chat a little bit about this year's conference themes, a theme incorporating it into your proposal, chat a little bit about the different types of sessions that we have. There's one that's new this year. Walk you through a little bit about how the selection happens, and then dig in a little bit into session requirements. And you're going to have to excuse my cat, who has decided that she wants to be on screen. And then we'll have plenty of time for Q&A. So this year's theme is in pursuit of justice, creating context for young people and adult learners to thrive. It's going to be October 10th through 12th at the Atlanta Hilton. And this year's conference theme, we really decided to build off where last year's conference ended. We had a really powerful final plenary session where a couple of big ideas came up. The first was we really have to be thinking less about interventions and more about building ecosystems, building contexts and experiences in which young people have the things that they need to thrive, right, from birth all the way through 25. And similarly, we need to create contexts in which adult learners, whether they're in secondary or post-secondary pathways, or our educators or parents inside of systems and community members have what they need to thrive. And we were also reminded in last year's session about this really important question about who needs to be at the table, who needs to be driving and creating the solutions that communities need. And so this theme, we hope, is going to give lots of room for folks to share the work that they're doing out in the field, but with this particular lens, right, the pursuit of justice. Which is taken from Martin Luther King's quote that it's not enough to have a negative peace, right, the absence of tension, but rather we have to build towards a positive peace, which is the presence of justice. So that's just a little bit about our thinking on the theme this year. So when you think about your proposal this year, the big question to keep in mind is what's going to help education grant makers build a path to a future in which young people, adult learners, and communities can thrive, right? Our primary audience is funders. We're excited to have, partners, community members, advocates there. But I think what we all want is for our funder members to walk away with a little bit more insight into what they can do and how they can support the field in moving in this direction. And so if you keep that question in the back of your mind, I think it'll help ensure that the session is as worthwhile and as useful as possible for the primary audience. So this year we have a couple of different session types. And the reason for this is we've noticed, and it's not only our conference, but the field as a whole, we've noticed that how people conference is a little bit different. It feels like pre-COVID, people used to come to conference, they would block out 3 days, and really be there and present and engaged in all of the sessions. What we're finding is that folks are just needing and wanting different modalities to learn, not necessarily the kinds of long sessions that we've historically had. People are wanting opportunities to kind of step out, maybe for an hour or two, do some work, step back in. So we are going to have our learning sessions, which are the kind that if you've been to a past conference, you will recognize. They're the 75-minute sessions, which are meant to cultivate an engaging learning space through an interactive workshop, a panel session, just a little bit longer period of time for presentations, for Q&A. The audience, again, is primarily education grant makers, but other conference attendees may be there. And so there are lots of things you can do with these learning sessions, right? Have a panel with Q&A, have a panel with opportunities for people in small breakouts to kind of sense make and to have small group conversations and then come back in. But really, what we want in these is an opportunity for folks to both learn and take the extra time to be able to make it relevant for them and to really engage with other folks. The second session type that we're offering this year are snapshot sessions, and they are sessions that we have done in the past. Pre-COVID, we did them for several years. They were very popular. And the purpose of those is to provide a fast-paced, punchy session that has high-level takeaways. Folks who do snapshot sessions are going to have the opportunity to present twice. So we're going to do these probably in the afternoon of both days. And so you would do a session, there'll be a second round where the folks would be free, and then you'll present your session again, right? So the length is 45 minutes, and we do have a suggested format, and I'm going to butcher the pronunciation of this, but I'm going to play you a video in about 3 seconds where the guy does actually pronounce it properly, but I think it's Pakachika, which is a kind of very fast-paced format where you're using PowerPoint slides sparingly with lots of images, but really honing in on the key elements and the key ideas, leaving lots of opportunities for folks to engage in discussion. So I am going to play this really short video. It'll be embedded in the PowerPoint that we put on the website, but it'll just give us an opportunity to hear what makes that kind of a presentation.
Hi, everybody. This is Brian at Pachakucha HQ in Tokyo. So happy to be here with you today, talking about what makes a great Pachakucha presentation. Having seen and made so many of these presentations, I'm going to be able to offer you a few tips for telling better stories and making bold Pachakucha presentations. So let's get started. Now, a PK presentation can really be about anything, but we love these words curiosity and passion. Vivian Mayer was a photographer who worked her whole life as a nanny in New York City, but she had a passion and curiosity for street photography that wasn't discovered until she died. What are you curious about? What's your hidden passion? When choosing a topic, start there. Now, as far as structure goes, we have the PK formats, which are great, but just because you have 10 or 20 images doesn't mean that you need to talk about 10 or 20 different ideas. You can do that like on the top, but it's often bolder to say more with less like on the bottom. Dedicate 2 or 3 slides to an intro, then to each concept, and then to a conclusion. Now, I always say start with pen and paper to write a general outline. One simple way to think about your presentation would be the classic high school essay, where you state a thesis in your opening, offer several paragraphs or images to support your thesis, and then a conclusion about why this is important to us. Another way to think about structure is the 3-act play, where in Act 1, you lay out some exposition with a few slides, tell us who you are and what you're going to talk about. Act 2 is your story, your passion, and a few slides dedicated to each idea. And then in Act 3, a big, brave finale, sending us off on a high note. Next, let's talk about images. We want to see big, bold, clear images that arrest our attention and capture our imagination. When you choose your images, think of the simple elegance of the Eames lounge chair. Let your image convey your idea for you. Now, we call this next slide Death by PowerPoint. Avoid graphs and charts, diagrams and text, and resist the corporate PowerPoint template. The more effort I have to make to decipher your slide, the less I can listen to you speak about it. Your audience will thank you for sparing them from slides like these. Well, they say image is everything and that a picture is worth 1,000 words. But where do you get your images? Well, you can search for large, beautiful images from the web or license-free websites and make sure that they're large, high-resolution images and that you have permission to use them. Of course, you can use images from your own devices and mix and match as you like. Once you've outlined your idea and focused on your story and collected all your images, it's time to storyboard your slides. Now, we can do this right on our website, but I like to start this process either in a blank folder on my computer or anything that I can use as a blank canvas. Next, you go to pachakucha.com, hit the Create button, upload your images, press play, and record as your slides auto-advance, just like I'm doing right now. Rehearse and re-record as often as you like, publish and share. Congratulations. You've just told your story with Pachakucha.
So obviously, I think for folks, we can play with that a little bit. It doesn't have to be pre-recorded, but I think the general idea of slides with minimal sort of like words and distractions. For these sorts of sessions, it might make sense to have handouts that you can give to the folks who are in the room so they can reference them. But we are also suggesting that you limit the number of speakers for these kinds of sessions, for any of the sessions actually, but for 75-minute sessions, we think you can do 3 to 4 speakers. For these snapshot sessions, we think it's going to be best to have 2 or 3 speakers and then give lots of time for conversation and discussion. So using the slides and the formal presentation, maybe of 5 minutes for each person to get the big ideas out there, have handouts or other things that folks can then reference and dig deeper into if they need to and want to. And then the third type of session that we're offering this year that's new is Funder Labs. And so, our conference, again, is meant primarily for our funder members, and we want community members, we want partners there. And we also have gotten feedback that there are times where funders would like funder-only spaces where they can candidly address issues that feel specific to funders and that aren't necessarily things that they want other folks in attendance for. And so those are going to be offered on October 12th, the final day of the conference. The length is going to be 75 minutes. So it's only education grant makers being invited to participate. And so when you read the RFP proposal guide, you'll note, right, we do ask in our sessions that we have diverse perspectives, that we have, diverse panelists. And for the funder only sessions, right, it's okay to have maybe 2 or 3 funders and no community members, and just know that those sessions are going to be not judged against different criteria, but we are going to be very sensitive to who the panelists are. So a little bit about how the selection process works. We have a conference planning committee that is comprised entirely of education grant makers who are EdFunder members. There'll be about 15 to 18. Once the RFP closes, we divide up proposals among the committee members. Each committee member deeply reviews about 15 or so. They give feedback, and then we have an in-person selection meeting where the group as a whole comes to a consensus on the 70 or so proposals that are going to be accepted. Every year we get over 150 proposals, and so everything can't be accepted. So what we try and do in the selection process is to make sure that we have, sessions that span birth through post-secondary and workforce readiness, spanning a range of kind of issues, perspectives. Equity, of course, is a really big consideration, and there is a question in the RFP where you get to share with us the ways in which your proposal or what kinds of equity issues your proposal is addressing. And so really trying to get a good cross-section, right, of sessions for our members. So we're going to be looking for things that are topical and future-facing, right? What does this mean for the work that we're going to be doing moving forward? We want these to be insightful and reflective. Some really powerful sessions in the past have entailed either nonprofit leaders, community partners, funders, really sharing candidly what their experiences have been, what the challenges are. So they're really kind of reflective and personal. We're looking for thought leadership and, as I said, diversity. We do want well-conceived and innovative learning formats. We recognize that 75 minutes, right, can make that hard, but to the extent that you're able to engage the audience and really make it a sort of dynamic back and forth that reflects what we know about adult learning, that's great. Clear lessons and evidence for funders, again, so that folks walk away with a sense of, this is what this means for me in my work. And then relevance to different types of funders. You don't need to, we don't want sessions that are so broad that everyone can come in. On the other hand, I think it's often helpful if you're an early childhood funder, for example, to have a session where maybe you're inviting in folks who are with K-12 or post-secondary because they need to know about that topic in early childhood as part of their own work. And so really having that lens on the content that you're proposing. So some session tips, again, make it relevant, accommodate different learning styles. So having graphs and pictures, having handouts, having opportunities for quiet, right? For folks to maybe spend 2 minutes thinking and reflecting before opening things up to Q&A. So just thinking about the different folks who might be in the room and what would be helpful for them, and then making it interactive. So keeping the presentation brief, get discussion, have people get around, maybe, go up and write things on the wall, walk around, do a gallery walk, do a show and tell, teach a skill, play a game, right? There are lots of ways. Think back to some of the sessions or conferences that you've been to and the sessions that are most engaging to you, and try and lean into that in your own design. And then I just want to go over speaker requirements. So we are asking, right? We don't want proposals that have aspirational speakers that we think we could get, the Secretary of Education, and then we find out you can't. So we really are asking you to confirm that your proposed speakers can participate when you submit the RFP. We're going to need the speakers to register for the conference, and we can go into this in Q&A in terms of the speaker registration, which is a unique one, but they will need to register. Expenses tend to be covered by funders, right? We want our nonprofit partners there. We want parents, we want students, and it is a burden for folks to have to pay their own way. That is not something that EdFunders pays for. So if you are proposing speakers for your sessions, please consider how you're going to support them with the expenses of traveling, hotel, etc. Meals are included as part of the conference during the duration of it, but the other expenses should be considered. We'll need you to provide speaker information, their name, their title, bio, picture, and then again, they need to commit to attending. We know things happen, we know emergencies happen, there are always changes, but to the extent you can get things kind of confirmed beforehand, you won't get the exact date and time of your session until later in the summer. And so what you really want to do is kind of say, hey, these are the 2 or 3 days when you might be needed, and please block those off. And then we'll let folks know as soon as possible in the summer about exact times. Some important dates: March 20th, proposals are due by 11:59 p.m. Pacific time. In late May and mid-June, you'll be notified about the status of your proposals. When you do get your email, this happened last year, please make sure that you read it through so that you're clear on the session type that you've been accepted for. We're going to ask you to submit for one session, maybe a learning session, for example, or the snapshot. But we will also ask if you're willing to do a different kind of session if need be, just in terms of the number of slots that we have. And so if you've indicated that you might be open to different kinds of formats, just make sure that you read the email to confirm what you were accepted for. August 7th is going to be early bird registration deadline. And then speaker registration deadline is yet to be decided. The conference registration deadline is going to be September 25th. And then the conference is October 10th through the 12th at the Atlanta Hilton. There'll also be some information coming out in the near future about the pre-conference day. So we're not taking active proposals for that, but there will be a pre-conference day. So you can find a link to the form and the guide at this email, or you can use the code, QR code, is that what it's called, to go directly to the form. And so now we're gonna just jump into Q&A. I know this was a lot. We'll probably want to go back and dig in deeper to some of these. As I said, if you prefer not to appear in the recording, just submit your questions in the chat. And please add programs@edfunders.org to your email contact list so that the emails don't end up in your junk email. So I'm going to open it up now. I will stop sharing and I can pull up slides as necessary. Any questions? Yes. So is there an opportunity to submit session proposals for something that is outside of the 3 types, i.e. a documentary screening? That's a really good question. I think for the RFP, we're probably not going to do that. What you might want to do is to email programs at edfunders.org if you have something like that, unless you want to do a documentary screening, inside of depending on how long it is, inside of a learning session. Okay, somebody asked, interactive. Many attendees at my past session had no laptop to do the online activities, and smartphone screens are too small. What do you advise? That's a really good question. And I would ask anybody who may have an answer to that to jump in. I mean, I think you could, in the session description, really indicate for folks that if they're coming to this, they should bring a laptop or something else, because it's going to be interactive using a digital platform. So that's probably your best bet for it. But there isn't probably going to be a way to, have a laptop available for everybody, or folks could, I guess, share. I know that's hard because you're not going to get different responses, but that would be my only other suggestion, unless someone else wants to hop in and give suggestions in the chat.
Hi, this is Kara, Program and Events Manager. I would say that you can adjust your session description to have, attendees. Not all attendees might come with a laptop, but we can adjust your session description to say that we can encourage attendees to bring their laptops to your session, in order to participate effectively in the session as well. That would be my suggestion too.
Then there was a question, is there a limit to how many proposals an organization can submit? There is. It's pretty high. Kara, do you know offhand?
I don't,
Okay.
but
we can sort of make
pretty high.
It is pretty high. I mean, I want to say it's something like 12 or 13. So it is very high. Now, that doesn't mean 12 or 13 are going to be accepted. We do, as we, make the final selections, think about having an opportunity for as many of our members to be able to share and present, right? So there isn't an advantage necessarily. It is true that some of our larger funders just have so many partners and are working in different areas, but we really do try to distribute opportunities to present as fairly as we can. Registration fee for speakers. That is, I don't know that that's been confirmed yet. It will be, and it'll be on the website and obviously available once registration is there. But I think last year it was $350. So it's likely to be that or close to it this year. If grantees are reaching out to funders to help them submit a proposal, does the funder, the GFE member, need to be a speaker? No. So in the RFP, you're going to be asked to provide the name of the person who is submitting. That person should be and needs to be a GFE member. They don't need to be a speaker. And then we are going to be asking for a secondary contact, since we know that funders are often really busy and there might be somebody else, right? Even a nonprofit partner or a consultant that's helping them in sort of submitting the RFP and being the person who's going to be, getting speakers together, doing all the details. So that secondary contact should be a person that will be responsive to the emails, and that Kara and the programs team can coordinate with and get in touch with around questions. Can nonprofits apply independently, or is there a requirement or benefit to applying with a funder? So only funders, only EdFunder members who are funders can submit sessions. So nonprofits can't submit independently. So what you might want to do if you are a nonprofit and you have something exciting that's going on is go to your funder, right, and say, we'd like to be able to submit to the Grantmakers for Education conference. If they are a member, most of the time they are happy to do that, right? They want to be able to share the work and the stories of the work that they're doing. If they're not a member, they can apply to be a member as part of the conference registration, and they get a discount on the registration fee. So that is possible. Sorry, there's a note. Speakers who are non-members and not funders should plan to attend for the day they are speaking. Yes, so that's important. So speakers are going to be invited to attend for the day on which they're presenting. They're not going to be able to stay for the full conference. And that's just to kind of, sort of account for space, size, etc. So if you have a speaker that is not a member, be sure that they understand that they're going to be coming in for the day. There's another question related to grantees working with funders to design a session. Can the grantee have access to the RFP form to help the funder put together the proposal? Yes. And Kara, I don't know if you want to hop in here to kind of give some specific advice on that, because I know there are issues with folks creating accounts.
So you should be able to create and collaborate on an RFP form together. So essentially everyone, you can create your own RFP account, and then you're able to fill out the information if you're partnering with a member, so that we know that you're working in collaboration with one of our members, if that makes sense.
Great. Okay. There's a question here about if the funder doesn't need to be a panelist, but has to submit. The question is, can the funder introduce the panel and not be included as one of the 3 to 4? So if we suggest 4 grantees partners, can the funder introduce the panel? Yes, I think that's fine, right? The reason that we say 3 to 4 is because if you have 8 people who are panelists and all of them are speaking for 5 to 7 minutes, it gets really unwieldy. But yes, and it's often a good idea, right, to have a funder on the panel, because again, our primary audience is funders. And so it's often useful to have the funder perspective, right? The funder is much more able to kind of like share with their peers in the audience some of the considerations, the way that they're thinking about things. So I would suggest, as you're thinking about the 3 to 4, that you include a funder if you can, but if you decide not to go that route and just have the funder introduce it, I don't think there's a problem with that. Is there a preference towards local regional learnings that can be replicated, or collaborations between national funders? So I wouldn't say that there's a preference, but I think both of those are really great examples of the kinds of things that we want to be sharing, right? So if folks can come to a session and say, wow, I could see doing this in a different part of the country, that's great, right? It's a very concrete way in which they can walk away and think about what they're doing. Collaborations between national funders, yes, you know, those are always kind of inspiring, and I think interesting, particularly at a moment when we're thinking about equitable grant making practices, right? As we see funders working together in different ways. I think that's something folks have a lot of interest in, and sort of digging into what are the advantages, what are the challenges, how did you kind of navigate some of the challenges that come from different organizations with different visions and missions, kind of aligning around a project, the outcomes, the impact, right? I think all of that is really helpful, but I won't say a preference, right? It's really going to depend on the types of proposals that we get and our selection committee and what they feel is going to be useful. How many people would you anticipate attending a learning session or a snapshot session? I'm thinking about how size of audience impacts design for interactivity. That is a really good question. We can't know for sure, and it varies. I would say average session size last year was probably about 20 to 25 for the learning sessions. Some were huge, right? Had 70 people in a fully packed room. Others were smaller because they were more, they were just more specialized. So it is hard to say. And I know that makes it really hard to think about design, which is why I think there are some formats that you can accordion a little bit more, just in terms of if it's Q&A or if it's table discussions, right? You could ask people to sit in groups of 3. If it's a smaller group, you could ask people to sit in groups of 6 if it's larger. So I appreciate the concern, and I would say 20 is probably about the average. Thanks, Rebecca. So Rebecca put in the chat that last year's average was 29. So I was a little bit low. So somebody said we may have multiple funder partners who are co-submitting together. Any tips on how that works in the RFP platform? I believe you want to just put one person, but you could indicate, you know, in the proposal somewhere that it's you know, multiple funders. But Kara, correct me if I'm wrong on that. But you know, it's, again, you just need one member to submit, and so maybe it's, you know, a member who's not submitting a ton of other ones, you know, that wants to be the sponsor for that particular session, and then just indicate somewhere else who else is going to be part of that session.
There is an opportunity to submit like co-authors or co-sponsors in the form as you add speakers and whatnot. So that is, you can also indicate that there too.
Any other questions? If you have questions along the way, you know, feel free to email the programs team. We're happy to kind of help as much as we can, you know, with helping you think through design and format. But I think a good question to ask is, what are sessions in the past that I found really engaging, and try and replicate that. And I think we all have so much we want to share, right? But it's almost like writing a précis, the essays where you have to like narrow it down to one page. It's harder to think about how to make things compact and short. And yet I think often folks can walk away with a lot more if they're not so inundated that they have time to kind of sense make. There is a proposal guide, and we've dropped a link to that in the chat. So please make sure you read it through before starting your submission. That's really helpful. Maybe create the answers, off in a different document and then put them in. There's a question about how long does the session proposal need to be? Is there a word limit? There is a limit. I can't remember what it is. Kara, you might remember.
I think it's 1,000 characters. It's indicated in one of the questions on that limit, and I'll also cut it off too automatically if you go over that limit as well.
And I think, just here I'll note, like, it is really important. The folks who are reading, we do try, we have a selection committee that represents a large range of kind of funder interests and perspectives, but know that somebody might be reading your proposal that isn't deeply familiar with your topic. And so being able to, talk about, and there are questions in the RFP around this, but why is this timely? Why is this relevant, right? There are some topics that are evergreen, right? And always important. But the more there's a sort of framing around why it's particularly relevant this year, why it's important, and in a way that somebody can understand who's not really deeply versed in your area, I think that's just, again, a really good exercise to go through to sort of communicate it to an audience. So we're asking for kind of thoughtful, more words isn't necessarily better. There's a question, what were some of your favorite sessions or the most memorable sessions from last year? I'm going to invite, I'm going to invite anybody who wants to come off mute or drop an answer in the chat, because I should not be the arbiter of what memorable and strong sessions are. I'm always, I always do love to hear, the personal perspectives. I think we're at a moment in our field when being able to understand the perspectives and the viewpoints of different folks is really helpful, and sort of in authentic and honest ways. I think that just kind of opens up a very different space. So that's always helpful to me. I think having young people where appropriate is super helpful, right? Or to have the folks who are directly being served by the program is really helpful. Sometimes it's just topical. I know that in past years, past recent years, there's been a real interest in sessions that are talking about the current context, whether it's the kind of culture wars or how the media is kind of engaging in things, but that's just me. I tend to love things that allow me to sort of get up, where there's maybe a panel, give me a couple of minutes to think about it, have places on the wall where there are questions that people can respond to, maybe with sticky notes, and be like, what's something that really struck you here? Or what's a question that you have? And then have a gallery walk and an opportunity to really see what other people are thinking. So that's one way to do it that's different than table discussions, just because it gives some insight into what's happening in the room as a whole. Anybody else want to get off mute and share, whether you're a EdFunder staff person or a participant?
I will. This year was awesome. I enjoyed the entire conference. Again, Travian Shorters was one person who really spoke to me. Again, just kind of pushing the envelope on how we process information and what does that begin to look like. Anytime I'm in a place where I can learn something different. And I also felt that intersectionality of fields was very important. So if it was psychology, sociology, learning something in a different way, in a different view, really challenged my thinking of how we did grant making. So I thought that was very important. And I agree with you. The sessions I attended where we had the panel discussions, and then there were the smaller breakout sessions where we had the sticky notes to kind of brainstorm through ideas. And other thing that I really loved, there was a session that invited us to kind of explore what they call a problem in the field, a problem of practice, in which we all kind of sat in these spaces and really talked about what does that begin to look like. And it gave us an appreciation for the brain trust that was in the room. And I really appreciated that last year.
Yeah, I think people are really leaning into the opportunity to create and develop relationships. And so, in sessions, right, that's an amazing opportunity to let people talk with other people who are obviously interested in a topic that's of concern to them. And so if you think about designing your learning sessions in that way as well, that it's not only about delivering content and giving people knowledge, but it's a space where people have come together because they care about this. And so how do you give folks an opportunity to kind of meet and connect and talk, right? I think that relational piece is something that folks are really looking for. And there are, just so that like last year, there are going to be some additional sessions, workshops, kind of deeper dives, et cetera, but those are just not those are created sometimes through kind of inspiration and ideas that come in through the RFP, but there will be other session formats just like last year. We're going to do the Equity Storytelling Fellowship again. So for those of you who are funders and might be interested, watch out for that. We're looking into doing a Writing a Racial Autobiography kind of session, kind of like the Equity Storytelling Fellowship, but we want that one to be open to leaders of color as well as white leaders. So we're gonna, we're mixing things up with other sessions as well. And thank you, Juanita, for getting off camera and or getting on camera and sharing your thoughts. Thank you so much for joining. It's really helpful to be able to kind of walk folks through what we're hoping for and make this process as useful and as seamless for you as possible. We really want to make the barriers to entry as low as possible, because that's where we sort of get great programming. Thank you all. Have a great weekend.